For years, Bumblebee has occupied the #1 spot for most popular Transformers character amongst the fandom, and the #1 spot for go-to Autobot in media projects. So, naturally, he's had a lot of different iterations across different continuities. Still, there's been one continuity in which he hasn't grown much, and that's the live-action movies. So, let's look at his character over the years and see where he could go. In his debut appearance, Bumblebee was one of several Autobots aboard the Ark that would later crash land on Earth as a last-ditch effort to escape from the Decepticons. Unlike his G1 cartoon appearance, this Bumblebee didn't have a spotlight role. His most significant moment was being destroyed by G.I. Joe in the American comic book crossover, and by Death's Head in the Marvel UK comic. However, that wouldn't be the end of Bumblebee, as he was rebuilt into a stronger form known as Goldbug. In this form, the aforementioned Bumblebee developed a more mature personality, even breaking away from the Grimlock-led Autobots with Blaster and going on their own adventures, one of which would thrust Goldbug into a leadership role, as he would lead the Throttlebots on a mission to rescue the captured Blaster, and the threat of the Scraplets. However, much like many Autobots in the Marvel comics, he was destroyed by an underbase powered Starscream, but once again, the yellow bugger escaped the jaws of death and was rebuilt as his classic self, Bumblebee. As far as the Sunbow cartoon goes, Bumblebee was originally cast as the spy/espionage of the Autobots in the pilot cartoon, but when the series came into full view, he took Hound's place as the Autobots' liaison with the humans, befriending Spike Witwicky and enjoying the role as a kid-friendly character throughout the series run. To follow suit with the Marvel comic, however, Bumblebee would once again don the name Goldbug. This time, however, he was severely damaged by Superior, who was infected by the hate plague, but would be revived by Quintesson in the Goldbug. Unlike his G1 Marvel counterpart, Goldbug didn't get much of a chance to lead the Throttlebots. This was mainly due to the original American cartoon ending, and the Japanese cartoon going in a completely different direction, with the Headmasters being the next phase. Then we have the infamously defunct Dreamwave continuity, where Bumblebee once again saw himself in a brief moment of leadership. In command of a small crew on a ship named Orion, Bumblebee was tasked with taking down the powerful Seeker clone Sunstorm, with the unfortunate help of Starscream. Throughout the briefing, members of the Orion would doubt Bumblebee's combat abilities, leading him to try to defy the odds when facing off against Sunstorm. While he was partially successful against him, members of the Orion weren't so successful, as they were left gravely injured at the hands of Starscream. As the mission continued, Bumblebee felt bad for not leading the Autobots to more favorable results, but this doubt would soon be dispelled as he had to help Jetfire bring down Sunstorm. Unsuccessful in his attempt, Bumblebee found himself at the mercy of Starscream, but was interrupted by Sunstorm, who was close to meltdown. In a last-ditch effort, Jetfire grabbed Sunstorm and flew him into the sun to save the Earth. Petrified from the inability to save his friend, Bumblebee deserted the Autobots and met up with Spike, who was lamenting the death of his father, Buster. Not much would happen as Dreamwave went bankrupt, but it's important to note that his final arc in this run was becoming Goldbug once again, via a Power Masters upgrade. So this will be a unique entry, as there are two distinct IDW takes on the Transformers universe. The one that started in 2005 and the one that was a soft reboot in 2019. In the 2005 IDW run, there wasn't much to Bumblebee as a character, but his defining moment in that run was being killed by Shockwave in the Dark Cybertron event. This is arguably the turning point for Megatron's controversial decision to join the Autobots. More on that in a different video. However, before being properly brought back, Bumblebee would return as a ghost that played a Jiminy Cricket to Starscream's Pinocchio. This now takes us to IDW 2019 Bumblebee, which would take him in a completely different direction than his previous incarnations. In this take on Bumblebee, he becomes a father/mentor figure to the newly forged Rubble. It's important to note that this occurred before the Great War, as Orion Pax advised Bumblebee to join the Ascenticons to keep an eye on Megatron. During a meetup to make him an official member of the Ascenticons, B left Rubble by himself, leading to his unfortunate demise at the hands of Quake, an unstable Ascenticon. While a member of the Ascenticons, B gathered information that would put Quake at the scene of Rubble's death. When he went to consult Orion about it, he already knew, but withheld from telling him not to risk the mission. With Quake being publicly paraded as a criminal, This gave Bumblebee an opening to get back at him. Stabbing Quake mid-transformation, he was able to remove the spark chamber, ultimately killing him. Autobot Smokescreen and Stakeout would then apprehend him, but it wouldn't be long before he's broken out of jail by Swindle and his crew. While running a mission with Charger and Firebeast, B ran into Barricade, whom he knew also played a part in the murder of Rubble, but chose not to take action as a way of honoring the words of Ryan Pax. As a form of retaliation against the Autobots Tournament Icon to rescue Ultra Magnus, the Decepticons attacked Swindle's bar, thrusting Bumblebee and Elita 1 into combat on the side of the Autobots. They would use underground tunnels to reach Crystal City, where they would meet up with the other Autobots and Optimus Prime, who would apologize to Bumblebee for taking him down a dark path, but he had already forgiven him and joined the Autobot movement. For the last two B iterations that I want to cover, I'll group them together because I'm more familiar with them and they were both in TV continuities. So first up we have Transformers animated Bumblebee, who was quite different from what fans were used to. It's important to note that this was 2007 and had been some time since Bumblebee was featured in a TV show, so the only base understanding of B as a character was what fans got in 1984. But this version of Bumblebee leaned into the character's little brother aspect more than his previous version. A young bot with a loud mouth and fast engine, it wouldn't take long before Bumblebee would become a nuisance to the Autobots. But for every witty remark and button mashing moment, there would be plenty of times for Bumblebee to show that his spark was in the right place when it came to safety Detroit or his team. Even with this brief character rundown of animated B, there's enough that makes him an interesting character, especially with his major character arc involving Bulkhead and Wasp, but that's a video for another time. Next we'll be looking at the aligned continuity B, who was undoubtedly inspired by the Bayverse version of the character with his inability to speak and car mode, but honestly that's where the comparisons end. The aligned continuity saw B rise from Scout to Warrior and to Leader at the end of it. Although I don't like how they continued this version of Bumblebee from the Predacons Rising movie, I will say that the aligned continuity took advantage of Bumblebee's scouting characteristic and utilized it to the best of their ability, using him to go on various missions that sometimes required straightforward strength or strategic planning. It was these moments that allowed Bumblebee to grow as a character, and more importantly to treat him as a character. Despite the step in the right direction, it was quite the controversy when they healed Bumblebee's voice in the finale. This is because prior to the finale, Bumblebee was seemingly okay with the fact that he was disabled. To get a more in-depth explanation on this, Emperor Kumquat has a video on mute characters. This now brings us to the live-action Bumblebee, the topic of today's video. Although his initial introduction to most of us came through the 2007 movie, there were movie prequel comics published by IDW that gave us more insight into the start of the Autobot-Decepticon War. But for the sake of the length of the video, I won't get too much in depth about all the IDW movie comics. For Bumblebee, however, his start in this universe came as a guardian of the Allspark with Cliffjumper at the Temple of Sinfer. It wouldn't take long before the two were attacked by aliens from the Ishim's Nebula. Taking cover from the attack instead of going on the offensive, High Protector Lord Megatron berated the two for their cowardice. However, in an act of redemption, Bumblebee and the team were led by Prowl to apprehend Optimus on behalf of Lord Megatron. Unaware that this was a trap, the unit would come to protect Optimus against the aggressors, who would later brand themselves as Decepticons. After years of war, the Autobots were tasked with activating the torch of Sentinel Prime at Sinfer Temple, which would have ended the conflict had it not been for Starscream destroying it. However, the Autobots were able to weaken the Decepticon forces enough to steal the Allspark, and will lead to Optimus launching it off-world. With the Allspark gone, the Autobots believed the Decepticons would focus on the Temple of Sinfer, but Megatron sensed it was gone and would torture Bumblebee for information. Unwilling to give up information, the Scout had his vocal processors crushed by the Tyrant. In a final act of desperation, Megatron chased the relic down, but the Autobots wouldn't be far behind, following him aboard the Ark. When they finally picked up the Allspark's energy, the Autobots sent Bumblebee down to Earth to track it. This is where the events of the 2007 film kick off and we are properly introduced to him. So, throughout the 5 Bayverse films, we get a pseudo character of Bumblebee in the sense that on the surface he does have a character, given the fact that he's the only other Transformer with the most screen time behind Optimus. So naturally he's going to have moments that the audience will attribute to him as a character. such as a badass fight scene, scanning a new alt mode, dropping witty one-liners, or just being in a scene in general. All these things are cool, but they don't add or provide any tangible takeaways from Bumblebee as a character. Without those moments that I just listed, then we really don't know much about Bumblebee at all. Like, what are his goals, dreams, and aspirations? These are things that we don't know about him before the movies or after, especially with how rushed and contrived The Last Night ended up being. Although it's easy to attribute these mishaps as simply bad writing, I want to take it a step further and say that it isn't merely bad writing, as the writers did do their best with what they were given. Rather, it's the fact they don't know how to write a person, or a bot in this case, with disabilities. Now, there are times when B is able to convey how he feels emotionally in certain scenes, but instead of letting it be a meaningful part of his character, the writers are quick to revert to it being an issue, and something that has to be fixed. This then takes away any significant characterization Bumblebee could have, because now we're back to square one, which is trying to fix him, as opposed to giving him a new arc to go through. I say all this to say that B's disability shouldn't be the reason that he isn't given proper characterization. If anything, it should allow for more diverse takes on his character, especially under writers and creators that come from the diverse background they're trying to incorporate in the Transformers. This brings me to the newest iteration of movie Bumblebee, and that is the Knight/Capleverse version of the character. Following suit of their predecessor, Bumblebee is once again without his voice, but only because it was initially conceived as a prequel to the Bay films. Even with the disability of losing his voice, the story still allowed him to be a character by having goals and ambitions, and more importantly, having the characters around him treat him as such, with Charlie acknowledging the fact that he has a bigger responsibility, and with him asking Optimus to refer to him as Bumblebee from now on. Now, they still have some work to do with clearly defining him as a character, because instead of giving him his own arc in Rise of the Beast, they killed him off so Mirage could have time for himself, which isn't a bad thing, but because they didn't commit to Bumblebee staying dead, it was evident that they weren't sure what to do with him. Considering there were only 2 films in the new live-action film universe, the verdict is still out on this iteration of the character, so I won't make a complete assessment on him just yet. But personally, I like to see this Bumblebee take after his IDW 2019 counterpart, where there is a clear end goal for the war, and with Bumblebee being a part of a young generation of Cybertronians, he could lead the charge for restoring Cybertron for the betterment of the next generation. In addition to that, I'd like this Bumblebee to become one with his disability. That way, the writers will have to find new ways to write his character without over-relying on past creative missteps.